the top military leader in Sweden was actually out rowing a boat in, just fishing. And then one of these came down in his lake. So that made quite a buzz. And he started up a search and rescue about this. And we do have some really interesting information like logbookings for it, but it kind of ends when they say, like, we found something.
Welcome back. I'm here with Tomas Bovinder. Tomas, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right. So we spent the last episode talking about ECRI. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some European UAP crash cases today. And one of the ones that I wanted to start with, to the extent that you have knowledge of the situation, was the Magenta recovery. What was that about? This is the one in Italy. What was that about, and what information do you know about that particular crash?
Yeah, the Magenta case, I think, is very interesting because David Grush has actually specifically mentioned this to be like the starting point, I guess, for the crash retrieval. I'm not sure if that's actually the exact starting point, but I don't know that much. But I guess it was a famous crash, and Mussolini, I think, was part of it. And it was also with the Pope. I think you can fill me in on this, but it seems to be a very big event. And this event was communicated to the Americans, I've been told. We haven't covered this case in particular, but it's just, you picked up some information along the way, just normally as you do. But yeah, do you know more about it?
The only thing I know about it is it crashed in Italy. Mussolini, or in Mussolini's government, the military under Mussolini, took it or recovered it, kept it in one of their hangars during the course of the war. And then toward the end of World War II, I think in 1944, the Pope had reached out through channels to the United States about this particular craft. And the Office of Strategic Services, the US OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA, sent a team and recovered it. And I don't know where they took it, where it went, but that seems to be what the genesis of the David Grush report is. Who knows, right? It could also be the same group, and this is me just speculating, that recruited all the former German scientists that were sent to the United States, or it may have been a completely different set of people. So it's definitely something I'd like to learn a lot about, because I only found out recently, within, the last year and a half, 2 years, that my wife's grandfather I knew he was in the army during World War II, but she had told me that he was like on a motorcycle driving through Europe during the time. And we were on the Western Front fighting in France, and she didn't really know, but her mother, my mother-in-law, found out that he was part of this organization that was the precursor to Operation Paperclip. And Paperclip was the operation to take German scientists back to the United States. So, right. And then her grandmother during the war, was working in the OSS in Washington, D.C., and was an expert on Argentina. So I feel like there's some tie to all this based on her family, but there's no way for me to get any further information. But I'd be curious to see if he was involved at all. Unlikely, but there's kind of all the right markers. So
yeah, and it's very interesting to have the Vatican, like the Pope, involved in this. And I've been personally thinking a lot about how much the church actually know. And I'm not religious myself. Are you, Sean?
I'm not super religious, but I am, I would identify as Catholic for sure. Yeah.
And I think also, if you go way back, like the Roman times and earlier than that, I think also we have seen the same kind of phenomena appearing and also crashing, I guess. But there's also a question of why these flying crafts crash. And sometimes I think it's by coincidence, but also it could be two UFOs interacting. I think there are oppositions, different fights between different factions. And then you
as
might
above, so
crash.
below, right?
Yeah,
as
it
above,
seems
so below.
that way. Yeah. But also there might be intentional crashes, apparently. And that's really interesting in terms of ECRI, because what we do here, I think, is monitored. And also, depending on the intention that you have, I want to believe that maybe something could happen intentionally, if you understand what I'm saying.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
I'm not a religious person. I don't believe it has something to do with divine intervention, but I think the non-human intelligence is a player in this. It's not just coincidence what's going on.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the other thing, though, you have to ask yourself is, if whatever these intelligences are wanted to disclose, there's nothing the government could do to stop them. So part of it is, what is holding them, or it, if you're talking about the phenomena in single terms, what is it that's holding them back? Is it that, it could be something rather benign, like take kind of a Star Trek concept of the prime directive, where you don't want to interfere with the development of a species. So it could be benign and beneficial, or it could be that they don't want to disclose because they're running experiments on people, and disclosure would make it much more difficult for abductions and things like that to occur. Or it could be a mixture of all of the above, like this prime directive sort of guideline might allow others to take advantage of something that's supposed to be beneficent, and kind of use it for darker things. So
I think we talked about that the previous episode, about US and their adversaries. And I think as long as we keep thinking about us and them and adversaries, perhaps we won't have a disclosure from them. They will try to wait, so to speak. Because I think actually we need to develop a bit, and we need to have this intention that is purely true, that we won't use it for personal gain. I think it's an important aspect of making this work. That's what I think.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
And of course, we see a lot of strife and conflicts and aggression all over. So you might wonder, are we ready for disclosure? I don't know. And maybe some factions of the NHA is actually thinking we could. But I think there are different opinions about that too, you know? So yeah, it's very complex. It is. But still, we do see things that crash. We see them on the radar. We see them with our own eyes. So it happens. And we can definitely touch it and pick it up. It is physical. I'm sure of that. It might be more than physical too. Sure.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, and it's happened for many, many years and centuries, perhaps before even man was here. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. And we have the Ocean X team, Dennis.
Let's talk about that. Because can you explain the Baltic
Sea
object?
anomaly? Yep.
Yeah.
He's the leader for the actual going out and exploring the team, so to speak.
What's his full name?
Dennis Åsberg. He's the leader or the creator and CEO of the company Ocean X team. And he, by chance, happened to see this object like on the seafloor in the Baltic Sea, and looked really strange. And when he went down there with the scuba divers, it was something that hadn't been seen before. It looked pretty much spectacular because it was kind of in the shape of the Millennium Falcon, you know, from the Star Wars.
Yeah, from Star Wars. Yeah.
So
it's kind of weird.
And
right?
Yeah, it's really weird. And news from all over the world were really interested in it. And you got this, you know, spike in attention. But then you had the skeptics and someone saying, oh, maybe it's a rock formation. And then, you know, it kind of died down. But it's a very interesting...
Well, he ran out of money, though, too, right? Like that was part of the reason he had... it started getting really expensive, and he was making progress, it sounds like, and then there was like a funding issue, and the skeptics kind of were able to... And look, I think it's fine to be a skeptic, and they have useful functions. I think if you're skeptical and you subject something to very detailed scientific scrutiny, I think that's great. But I think being a skeptic to be a skeptic is just as bad as people who see Jesus in their pancakes every morning, right? Let pareidolia run everything. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So say more about this Baltic anomaly.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you're right. It's like you don't know what this is. That's the point. And Dennis is not claiming it is extraterrestrial, but they have experienced very strange anomalies as they have approached this object.
Such as?
Well, magnetic disturbances from the compasses, for example, and malfunctioning equipment that usually just work fine. So that's been a question mark. And they've seen also, you know, other things, I think also weather phenomena and stuff. So yeah, they've been curious to investigate it further. And so it's very interesting to have this case also on our table. But of course, we do need funding for this. It's a great undertaking to go down on those depths.
Especially now, how has the recent Russo-Ukrainian war impacted that too? Because it's in the Baltic Sea. Baltic Sea is an area where there's obviously going to be a lot of NATO submarine activity, a lot of Russian submarine activity. How does that risk play into all of this? Just quickly, I don't want to, you don't have to opine on global geopolitics, but it is an important consideration, right?
Yeah. So I've been living on the east coast of Sweden, growing up there, and I've seen submarines myself. So the Baltic Sea have been an active area when it comes to spying. And yeah, it's an interesting point to have, a good placement, strategic placement. Of course, even more interesting right now. And we do have the presence of NATO have been very interested about this area, and specifically this Ocean X spot is also attracting attention from other countries. Yeah, and it can be quite quick, from the discovery to have different eyes on site, so to speak. But it's international water, I think. I'm not an expert on the exact depth and so on, but Dennis is, of course, and we are hoping to start this case also, perhaps, or restart it. But for that, we need funding. Yeah, and of course, it's a sensitive area, and there has been a diplomatic problem to do this, and also different interests in actually having a team or doing exploration for this, not just from Sweden, but different countries.
And where's the diplomatic problem lie? Is it just because it's in international waters and the Russians are problem, or is it also intra-NATO kind of issues? I'm acting like Sweden, I think, is just in the process of joining NATO. So when you say diplomatic issues, what does that mean?
I can't say too much. I think Dennis should be the one who tells us more about this. But to have the funding that you need someone with a good wallet for sure. And so far, we haven't been able to find a good partner for this. I think the best thing would be a national, a Swedish funding partner for sure. That would be the best. And I don't think anyone can actually claim this as theirs. And it's very interesting because it might be a very old structure, and there are research projects going on right now on the coast of Sweden, on just the lower depths of the Baltic Sea. And these are areas where they might be built with wind power plants.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. So we are actually racing against the clock to save some really interesting archaeological spots that they can show signs from very old civilizations, older than they should be, so to speak. And we don't know if this object in the Baltic Sea that Dennis is focusing on is extraterrestrial. We don't know that, but for sure it's very interesting, and it might be a crashed saucer. We don't know yet.
Or as you said, it could be a structure from a more advanced human civilization, or more advanced civilization.
Yeah.
In pre what we would now know as human history, right?
The thing is,
or it could be something else entirely, right? It could be a rock formation for all we know, right?
It could be something from the Second World War as well. That it's just has been there without us knowing it. But anyway, whatever we find, just by looking and spreading out different hooks, both on land and in the sea, it will be interesting. And you never know what to find, really. It could be like an ancient civilization, of course, and it could be just a prosaic thing. Yeah, so it's exciting.
What other anomalies did the Ocean X team experience that you know of? Kind of magnetic anomalies you talked about. Anything outside of that?
I think it was something with a weather phenomena that was hindering them. Can't really remember the specifics right now. But Dennis Wasberg is, in general, they are looking for treasures, like the treasure hunters. So they are not really used to, go looking for flying saucers or that kind of thing. So they were quite surprised to be, so to speak, hindered in the way of the magnetic disturbances. I know that much. So yeah, it's basically that. And of course, also other intelligences being very interested in the area. That's also, I think, something that highlights the importance of this area.
When you say other intelligences, do you mean other human intelligence organizations, or do you mean other intelligences, like non-human intelligences?
I'm thinking about the human intelligences now. And yeah, governments, I guess. But then also it's hard to know exactly who is on site. On the radar, it should say, but I'm not sure it always does, right?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody might make a phone call, turn off the radars, right?
Yeah.
Or interesting.
But this is just secondhand information now from me. But Dennis is the expert on this case, and we haven't really started this yet. But it's very nice to have Dennis on board, and maybe we'll look into it.
Yeah, I mean, despite the skeptics, the fact that the intelligence community is interested is usually a signal that where there's smoke, there might be fire. Okay, what other cases, just in general, should American audiences or just global audiences be aware of in terms of European UAP crash sites? Or potential, alleged. You got to use the right language.
So I won't be speaking too much about the actual cases that we are highlighting or like focusing on.
Just general cases, I think, is fine.
Mm-hmm. But one of the main UFO events in the early 1940s was the ghost rockets. I think, have you addressed it in your podcast before?
I have never addressed it, but I think it would definitely be interesting to understand first, what were the ghost rockets? When were they first seen? What were they? Or what do people think they are? And then does it continue to this day?
Well, it was a series of years where in the 43, I think it first started, where you had some, cylindrical objects, pretty much like torpedoes or rockets, and they just like fell down. And many of them actually seemed to be aiming at lakes in Sweden and also Finland, Norway. And it was heaps of them, like thousands falling down. So this was quite well known in the UFO community and was pretty much the big thing that year. And the top military leader in Sweden was actually out rowing a boat in, just fishing. And then one of these came down in his lake. So that made quite a buzz. And he started up and like a search and rescue about this. And we do have some really interesting information like logbookings for it, but it kind of ends when they say like, we found something. So
of course it does.
Yeah. And that also led to some high intelligence officers coming and visiting Sweden and speaking to our top military leaders. And from there on, we don't really know what's been going on. But we have some declassified files right now that are really interesting. And the filmmaker, Emil Marshak, that I told you about the last previous episode, he's actually doing a series. I think it's 6 episodes. And he called this the Swedish X-Files. So one of these episodes will be about the ghost rockets that I told you about. Also, he's been interviewing Charles Hall. It's a documentary called Walking with the Tall Whites.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, this is in Nevada.
Yep.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, he's done some interesting documentaries at least, and I think it will be a nice...
Charles Hall. I thought you said Charles Soule. Okay. Charles Hall. Yeah. Okay, I know.
Yeah. I guess he's pretty big in the States, right?
Yeah, people are aware of the tall white story that he has. So he's like a weather controller, or was a weather controller for the U.S. Air Force. Yeah.
So it's interesting to have the possibility to do documentaries about what's going on with ECRI, I guess, but also, like recent cases that have been reopened, military declassified materials. And I guess those kind of cases are probably cold cases, and cold for a reason, I guess. But when we talk about the ghost rockets, it was so many that fell down. And also, perhaps not all of them were just crashing, but maybe they also kept on going, like subwater, and then took off again. But it's worthwhile investigating. But that's like a very famous Swedish case, and all ufologists know about this in Sweden. So, it's been done investigations previously as well. But now we also have different, like, better technology, better ground radar or like subwater radars. So perhaps it could be interesting to go back to some of those cases. Perhaps.
And is that something that still happens today, or is that just kind of a very discrete time period with the at 1943?
I think I want to say no comment on that.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
There's another phenomena that's also been seen in Scandinavia. Begins with an H. It's the lights, like the strange lights.
Well, I've seen myself, I've seen some strange lights, but it depends on what you mean.
There's an anomaly in, I think it's Norway. And it's not, we're not talking the
Yep, I know what
lights.
You mean. Hessdalen lights. Mm-hmm.
Hessdalen lights. Do you know anything about that you can explain to the audience what that phenomena is and why it might be of interest?
Yeah. Well, those objects seems to be orb-like, like glowing lights, and they have the characteristics of very irregular flight patterns, defying gravity and acceleration patterns that we know of. So there is definitely, I think, something there, and it has been investigated by many different investigators. And I know personally myself a man who has seen these and also taken pictures of them. So for sure, I think the Hessdalen lights are very, very interesting. And also right now they are actually diving. Another team are diving to see what they can find out. I think they've actually found something in one of the lakes. So one of
the ghost rockets or Hessdalen lights?
It might be something similar to a ghost rocket, because it seems to be several meters long and cylindrical in shape. So yeah, it seems to be. I think he's called Chris Litho.
Litho Files. Yeah,
Litho Files. He has been there and interviewing the team and so on. So I think if you are more interested in that, you can look that up. But we have a local source that knows the people living in that village. So we do get some, behind the scene information about this investigation. And we are really hoping that it will turn out to be something extraterrestrial or something non-human, because that would be a great breakthrough.
Yeah, for all you know, it could also be perfectly natural phenomena that's on Earth, right? That
could be.
That just lives in the atmosphere. And again, I don't know, but that is also intelligent, right? Who knows, right? There could be still plenty of things on our own planet that we don't know exists, like this, kind of the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, right? It could be in that realm or not, who knows? What other phenomena or kind of not famous, but well-known crash retrievals in Europe or crashes should audiences be aware of?
There are cases in every country, as it seems. We have been investigating or started an investigation of one local case that's, I won't say too much about it, but it's like the local Roswell in that country. And it's been documented very well, and it's been investigated and excavated a couple of times. And some of these cases are interesting, absolutely. I mean, there might be fragments left, but we also have the difficulty of contamination, because if someone is going there, and it might actually be a deliberate spread out of metals, sometimes it's hard to expect too much from a cold site like that, like a famous crash site.
The US has done that too. The US does that too.
Okay.
There's a lot of like just trashed tin cans, things like that, aluminum cans that are just strewn across a former crash site to effectively camouflage it and prevent people from digging.
And then if you have like your donor,
just got a garbage there, right?
Yeah, and then you have kind of wasted your money and your effort and on something that was meaningless. It's interesting, these historical cases, for sure. But I think that the most important cases are just the really hot cases that are happening right now. So the Hessdalen case, where they're going diving for this cylinder, I think it's very, very interesting. We have more cases in Sweden too that I won't go into. But on the other side of the Baltic Sea, we have the Russian scene. And I think we have heaps of already recovered things there as well. And in the Ukraine, I think also a war zone attracts a lot of UAPs, I think. For what reasons, I don't know, but maybe they want to know what's going on and what we're doing.
Well, it's like the Foo Fighters in World War II, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Similar thing.
Yeah. So, and that's the point. That's also a problem when it comes to crashed, unidentified flying objects, let's say in Germany, because it might be, a torpedo or a bomb that you're trying to dig up. And as we spoke about in the previous episode, the personal safety issue is important. So you cannot just have an excavator and go digging, but you need to do the archaeological, the very sensitive stuff in the end of the dig out.
Well, they still have minefields
they do.
In France,
and in former Yugoslavia,
yeah.
But they do have recovered or removed a lot of those mines, I guess. But there are still incidents of accidents, people, getting hurt. So, it's a tricky world we live in, and we have had so many wars and conflicts. So, there are layers and layers of mysteries underneath us.
Speaking of layers of mysteries, as you overlay some of these potential or alleged crash sites with nuclear facilities, do you see the same correlation? In the United States, nobody really talks about it, but there's an intense correlation. It's very, very strong. Even as an example, there's an abduction case. It's the Tuscaloosa case, right? And I found out about 2 weeks ago that in that same town, they built nuclear attack submarines, right? So even that abduction case was right next to a facility that was making objects that were powered by nuclear reactors. So do you see the same sort of correlation in Europe as we do in the States?
Yeah, for sure. We do. We know about cases in Great Britain. I think also in France, they have also the nuclear capabilities. And in the time of the Ghost rockets, Sweden was one of the few countries in Europe that were actually developing nuclear weapons. And, we were just signing papers to do this. And this program was a very big reality. And then these Ghost rockets started to just fall down. So, and I've also personally seen connections both to nuclear plants, sightings, and also when it comes to special ground radioactivity, it also seems to be attracting this phenomena. This is my personal own opinion, and I don't know the reason for it, but maybe they can absorb energy in some sort when it comes to just radioactivity. But also it seems to be, I think, clear that they are concerned about us having big bombs. I mean, it could end the world as we know it.
Yeah,
So yeah,
depending
there's
on their
definitely
intent,
a link.
and depending on their intent, they could see it as a threat too. So again, I don't know which. That's the problem when governments of the world don't admit the basic reality. You can't even ask these follow-on questions because no one has confirmed the existence of these. I mean, it seems to be pretty clear that these entities do exist, but what they are, where they come from, what their intentions and motivations are, is very unclear. You talk to one person, they're all space brothers, and they're just waiting for us to rise to their level of consciousness. You talk to other people, the Greys are, a species that's trying to quietly hybridize us out of existence and does not want disclosure. Again, I don't know which of these stories is true. It could be some bit of all the above. They could be future humans trying to prevent us from destroying ourselves. It could be future humans trying to make sure that we destroy ourselves so that they exist, right? There are any number of possibilities with this sort. It could be more spiritual. It could be entities that are trying to push forward our evolutionary trend and make sure that we get through the crises that are endemic to a species that is becoming more advanced. I don't know. And I think it would be helpful if we had more answers. Well, I don't think the government has all the answers. I guarantee there's somebody within government that has more answers than we currently do, that has classified some of these things. Yeah. So it sounds like the nuclear thing seems to be something that is common to much of the phenomena. And for what reason, I don't think, I don't know. The government probably has a good idea, but I don't know. What other sort of commonalities do you see? Do you see any of these cases that bleed into folklore, right? So if you take Jacques Vallée's work, Passports to Magonia, a lot of things that were considered folklore back in the day may have been encounters with whatever these entities are. So I know in Scandinavia, there's a lot of lore, folklore about elves, things like that. Ireland, you kind of have the Fae, the She, various entities like that. Is there any link, however tangential it might be, that you see between historical folklore and some of these encounters?
Yeah, all those thoughts and theories I think are interesting, but speaking as a representative from ECRI, I think it's crucial that we must first find scientific proof.
100%.
And from there, we can have all these questions that we long for to have answers. And so personally, I do believe that the phenomenon is very complex. I do believe. And I'm sure that we have extraterrestrial presence here on Earth. And otherwise there's no point in looking for crash retrieval. Is it physical? Yeah, it's physical. Has it always been physical and manifested in the same way? I'm not sure. Historical sources tell us that probably, the looks of these crafts have been here for a long time, right? So speaking of folklore and like the work of Jacques Vallée, for example, I think it's too early to say anything about that, speaking from my role as the coordinator from ECRI. But I think the discussion is very important, and I think it's also a very crucial thing to investigate and to search for personally, to be able to actually help the disclosure forward. Because, as I said in previous episode, we can do things, every person has a role to fill. And I think some people are scientists and they can do the spectrometrical tests and analysis, and other people have, the more spiritual approach. And we need all the people, all the different minds coming together to actually make this disclosure happen. That's my own personal belief. And the focus for ECRI is the nuts and boltsy thing. I want to be clear with that. Yeah.
Yes, concrete, results-driven, rigorously scientific, and
peer-reviewed. So, it matches the form that we can accept as a society.
But you will, when you collect the data, you will also, when you're interviewing witnesses, record at least what they say. So you'll have the data behind some of the more non-physical aspects of the phenomena. So at least from a scientific basis, you could at least correlate whether or not there are similar themes or patterns with some of these experiences, right? Because that could still be part of a scientific effort, at least having the data to have some of these, what I think Jacques Vallée would say is like a 7 strangeness, high strangeness factor, whatever that might be. It could just be time dilation in certain regions or observed time dilation. It could be some of these spiritual things, but you'll at least collect the data and let other people analyze and decide what to do with it.
100%. And being an experiencer myself, I think it's super important to listen to people without a judgment. That's right. Like, I couldn't do this in another way.
All right. Any final words for the audience about European crashes and crash retrievals?
Yeah, I don't know. We're heading into interesting times for sure. And I don't know if the world is ready for a greater or wider reality, including NHI. I don't know if we are ready for new thoughts, but if we don't try, we will never know. And I'm sure there are exciting stories out there, and we are here to listen. And our main goal is to show all of you out there that we are just common people just like you. We try to find the meaning of all this, and we do our best. We will, make mistakes, but we'll have a pure heart and a true intention to just share what we can find. And we're doing this pro bono, from the money from our own pockets, with our own time. And personally, I've decided to put my whole time into this and to help this project on. And we hope that more people will join and use the website and come in with the cases and the reports. And from there, I hope we can just try to find that special case that will be solving and making us move forward in the disclosure.
All right, my friend. I wish you great luck in this endeavor. Again, as I said in the last episode, you're doing God's work. So I look forward to continuing to keep in touch and celebrating all your victories in this approach.
Yeah, and the same. We never know what's going to happen, and maybe this is the year.
Yeah, I think something's going to happen this year. I think the big year is 2026. For what reason? Just a lot of folks who have a closer contact, like Chris Bledsoe, people like that, John Ramirez, former CIA. 2026 or 2027 seems to be the year where an event of some sort might. Again, I'm not saying it will. I'm not making any predictions because I don't know.
But that gut feeling is very important. You should always trust your gut. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely on a subconscious level. So, all right, my friend, I will talk soon.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me again. Take care.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's two options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.